She called him lazy in front of her country club friends. She made him eat dinner in the kitchen while she entertained guests in the dining room. She told her mother he was just the help when they first met. For 5 years, Khloe Tapia treated her husband, Vincent, like he was beneath her. She had no idea that the man she ridiculed for working at a garage actually owned the entire automotive empire. She didn't know that her struggling mechanic husband had a net worth that made her family's old money look like pocket change. But Khloe was about to find out. And when she did, it wouldn't just cost her marriage. It would cost her everything she thought defined her worth. This is the story of a woman who confused her husband's humility for weakness, his kindness for stupidity, and his silence for acceptance. What she learned at her family's annual charity gala didn't just shock her. It destroyed the carefully constructed world of privilege she thought could never be touched. Before we dive into this powerful story, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button right now. Because stories like this, stories about justice, karma, and the danger of judging people by their appearance, these are the stories that need to be heard. Let's show the world that character matters more than color, and truth always wins in the end.
This is not just a story, this is a lesson.
Now, let's begin. The reservation at Le Bernardin was for 7:30. Vincent arrived at 7:15, wearing the only suit he owned, a navy blue off-the-rack number from Men's Warehouse that he'd bought for their wedding 5 years ago. It still fit, though the cuffs were slightly frayed, and the shoulders had that telltale shine that comes from too many wearings and not enough dry cleaning money. He'd wanted to surprise Khloe. Their 5th anniversary. Wood, traditionally. He'd spent 3 weeks carving a jewelry box from maple in the small workshop behind the garage where he worked. The box had a secret compartment, and inside that compartment, he'd placed a handwritten letter. The letter said things he could never seem to say out loud. Things about how much he loved her. How he'd hoped, over these 5 years, that she would eventually see him as more than a mistake she'd made after too many cosmopolitans at a hedge fund manager's birthday party. The restaurant was the kind of place where the waiters wore better suits than Vincent owned, where the sommelier discussed wine regions with an accent that made Vincent feel like he was sitting in a foreign country without a translation guide. He'd saved for 6 months to afford this dinner. Every overtime shift at the garage, every weekend spent doing oil changes and brake jobs for extra cash. The hostess, a tall blonde woman with the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes, looked at Vincent like he'd walked into the wrong building. "Can I help you?" The question was polite. The tone was not. Reservation for Hayes. 7:30. She scrolled through her iPad with manicured fingernails that probably cost more than Vincent's grocery budget. "I see it. However, our dress code requires a jacket and tie for—" She paused, her eyes taking in his suit again. "That is a jacket, isn't it?" "Yes, ma'am." "I see. Well, your table isn't quite ready. If you could wait at the bar." Another pause. "On second thought, perhaps you'd be more comfortable waiting outside. We have a lovely bench on the sidewalk." Vincent felt the familiar heat in his chest. Not anger. He'd learned long ago that anger just confirmed what people like this already believed. Just that low, constant burn of being made invisible in plain sight. "I'll wait at the bar. Thank you." He'd been sitting at the bar for 20 minutes, nursing a $7 soda water with lime, when Khloe arrived. She swept through the entrance in a white Stella McCartney dress that Vincent knew cost more than 3 months of his salary. Her honey-blonde hair was styled in loose waves that required weekly salon visits to maintain. Diamond studs glittered in her ears, a gift from her father on her 30th birthday, worth more than Vincent made in a year. She was beautiful. That had never been in question. But there was something about the way she carried herself, like the world was a stage built specifically for her performance, that made her beauty feel aggressive, a weapon rather than a gift. She didn't see him at first. She was talking to someone on her phone, her voice carrying across the restaurant in that particular pitch that wealthy white women master early, loud enough to ensure everyone hears them, but calibrated to sound like they're completely unaware anyone else exists. Daddy, I'm telling you, the new pool designer is incompetent. He keeps talking about water features, when what I clearly specified was a Mediterranean style. She paused as the hostess approached her with that same cool smile. But this time, it was genuine. This time, the woman recognized the class when she saw it. Mrs. Hayes, your table is ready. Your husband is waiting at the... Chloe's eyes swept the bar and landed on Vincent. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, he saw something in her face that looked almost like disappointment. Then it was gone, replaced with a bright smile that didn't quite disguise the tightness around her eyes. Vincent, there you are. I thought we said 7:45. She hadn't. She'd said 7:30. But Vincent had learned that correcting Chloe in public was worse than being wrong. My mistake, he said, standing. The bartender, who'd been polite but distant, suddenly became even more invisible as Chloe took Vincent's arm. Not affectionately, more like a woman holding a handbag. She wasn't quite sure what went with her outfit. As they walked to their table, Vincent didn't see the man in the corner booth. The man in the impeccably tailored Tom Ford suit, eating alone, who looked up from his Dover sole with sudden, sharp interest when Chloe touched Vincent's arm. The man who pulled out his phone and made a call that would change everything. But we'll get to that later. The table was by the window, which meant everyone in the restaurant could see them. Vincent suspected Chloe had requested it. She liked being seen, being admired, being envied. What she didn't like, what she'd made clear over 5 years of marriage, was being associated with Vincent in public. So, she said, once they'd been seated and handed menus that had no prices, which Vincent had learned meant the prices were even worse than he'd feared. I wanted to talk to you about something. I wanted to talk to you too. Vincent reached into his jacket pocket for the jewelry box. Happy anniversary, Chloe. She glanced at the box. Maple wood, hand-carved, hundreds of hours of work. And something flickered across her face. Not pleasure. Something closer to irritation. That's sweet. But Vincent, we need to discuss something serious. This is serious. I made this for... The Huntington Gala is next month. She said it like she was announcing someone had died, which, in Chloe's world, missing a social event was probably equivalent to death. Daddy's company is being honored. It's going to be the event of the season. Everyone will be there. Vincent set the box on the table. Okay. I need you to understand that this is important to me, to my family, to my reputation. I understand. Do you? Chloe leaned forward, her voice dropping to that particular whisper that was somehow louder than speaking normally. Because last time, at the Vanderwall wedding, you told my mother you worked at a garage. Do you know how that sounded? I do work at a garage. You're a mechanic, Vincent. That's different from how it sounds. You could have said you were in the automotive service industry. You could have been vague. But no, you said garage like you were trying to embarrass me. Vincent felt that burn again. Hotter now. I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I was telling the truth. The truth? Khloe laughed, but there was no humor in it. The truth is that I married beneath my station. Everyone knows it. My parents know it. My friends know it. God, Vincent, even the valets at the club know it. But we don't have to advertise it. The waiter arrived. A young man with slicked back hair, who looked at Khloe with the reverence usually reserved for visiting dignitaries. Have we decided? The branzino, Khloe said without looking at the menu. Steamed vegetables, no butter, and another glass of the Sancerre. The waiter turned to Vincent. And for you, sir. Vincent looked at the menu. Even the appetizers were $40. The entrees started at $70. He'd budgeted $300 for the entire dinner, which he now realized was wildly insufficient. The chicken, please. Excellent choice. And to drink? Water's fine. Khloe's lips pressed into a thin line. He'll have a beer. Whatever's on tap. We don't have beer on tap, madam. We have a curated selection of craft beers from... Just bring him something American. The way she said American made it sound like an insult. After the waiter left, Khloe leaned back in her chair with that expression Vincent had come to dread. The one that said she was about to explain something to him, like he was a child who'd brought home a bad report card. I'm going to need you to stay home from the gala. Vincent blinked. What? It's better this way. You'll be more comfortable. And honestly, Vincent, you don't fit in at these things. You stand in the corner. You don't network. You make people uncomfortable. I make people uncomfortable? Your presence does. You must see that. My father's colleagues. They ask questions about how we met, about your background, about your family. She said family the way someone might say criminal record. I can't help my background, Khloe. No, you can't. Which is exactly why it's better if you're not there. I'll tell people you're working, that you committed. No one will think less of you. They already don't think of you at all. Vincent set down his water glass very carefully. Too carefully. The way you set something down when you're afraid that if you're not careful, you might throw it. 5 years ago, he said quietly, you told me you loved me. Do you remember that? Khloe sighed. Vincent, love it's complicated. We're adults. We have an arrangement that... An arrangement? His voice was still quiet, dangerously quiet. Is that what you call this? What would you call it? You needed a green card. I needed to rebel against my parents, to prove I was different, progressive, not like them. She laughed, and it was the saddest sound Vincent had ever heard. And look how that turned out. The man in the corner booth stood up. Vincent didn't see him walk out, didn't see him pause by their table, close enough to hear Khloe's next words. You were supposed to be my act of defiance, Vincent, but defiance gets exhausting, and honestly, I'm tired of pretending this works. The man in the Tom Ford suit smiled and walked out of the restaurant to make a phone call. They didn't finish dinner. Vincent paid, watching his carefully saved money disappear for a meal they barely touched, and they drove home in silence. Khloe is in her BMW. Vincent was in his 15-year-old Honda Civic with the check engine light that he kept meaning to fix but never quite found the time. The house was in Khloe's name. Everything was in Khloe's name. It was a wedding gift from her parents, a 4-bedroom colonial in Greenwich, Connecticut, with a circular driveway and professionally landscaped gardens that required a full-time gardener, Vincent had never been allowed to meet. He wasn't allowed to meet the gardener because Khloe didn't want the staff knowing she was married to the help. Vincent parked his Civic in the street. He wasn't allowed in the driveway. Khloe said the car lowered the aesthetic of the property. He walked up to the front door and used his key. It stuck, the way it always stuck, because Khloe had never bothered to get him a properly cut copy. Inside, the house was everything Vincent wasn't. Expensive, cold, designed for display rather than living. Khloe had decorated it herself with the help of an interior designer, whose Instagram had 200,000 followers. Every surface was white or cream, or some shade of beige that had a fancy French name. There were no photographs of Vincent anywhere. Khloe said photographs were too personal for the main living spaces. There was exactly one photo of him in the entire house, a small 5x7 frame on Khloe's bedside table. In it, Vincent was standing slightly behind her at a charity function. You could barely see his face. Khloe said it was her favorite. He walked to the bedroom they theoretically shared, but where Khloe had increasingly made clear he wasn't welcome. She was already there, changing out of her dress and into silk pajamas that cost more than Vincent's monthly car payment. "I think," she said without looking at him, "we should consider our options." "Options? I'm 35 years old, Vincent. My friends are having second babies, moving to bigger houses, getting promotions, and I'm stuck with a mechanic who doesn't even own a decent suit." Vincent felt something inside him finally break. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet snap, like a wire pulled too tight for too long. "You're right," he said. Khloe turned, surprised. What?" "You're right. We should consider our options." He pulled out his phone, a 2-year-old iPhone with a cracked screen protector, and opened his email. "I've been waiting for the right time. I guess this is it." Waiting for the right time for what? Vincent looked at his wife. Really looked at her, and saw, perhaps for the first time, that she'd never actually seen him at all. "To tell you the truth." He pressed send on an email he'd written 6 months ago. An email to his attorney. An email that started with the words, "It's time." "What did you just do?" Vincent smiled. It was not a kind smile. "I just changed your life, Khloe. You'll find out how at the Huntington Gala." And then Vincent, who'd been treated like nothing for 5 years, walked out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and out of the house. He got in his old Honda Civic, with its check engine light and worn seats, and drove to the place he actually lived. Not the house where Khloe kept him like an embarrassing secret. His real home. The $50 million penthouse in Manhattan. The one with his name on the deed. Because Vincent wasn't just a mechanic. He was Vincent J. Hayes, CEO and majority shareholder of Hayes Automotive Group, a company worth $3.2 billion. And Khloe was about to find out at the gala that the man she'd been treating like garbage owned the company her father worked for. Before we continue this story, I need to know something. Are you enjoying this? Because if you are, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is dedicated to stories that matter. Stories about justice, karma, and what happens when people judge others by the color of their skin instead of the content of their character. My mother told me I'd never reach 500 subscribers. She said nobody cares about these stories anymore. Help me prove her wrong. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, And let's show the world that stories like Vincent's deserve to be heard. Now, let's get back to what happened when Khloe learned the truth about her poor mechanic husband. The morning after their disastrous anniversary dinner, Khloe woke up alone. This wasn't unusual. Vincent often left early for work. What was unusual was the envelope on the pillow, where Vincent usually slept. Inside was a single sheet of paper. At the top, Huntington and Associates, attorneys at law. Below that, a brief letter. Mrs. Khloe Tapia Hayes. This letter serves as notification that Vincent J. Hayes has retained our services regarding matrimonial matters. We request that all future communication regarding your marriage be directed through our offices. We will be in contact shortly to discuss dissolution proceedings and asset division. Respectfully, Robert Huntington, Esquerman. Khloe read it twice, then a third time. Then she picked up her phone and called the only person who would understand. Her mother, Khloe Tapia, whose opinion on Khloe's unfortunate marriage had been made clear at the wedding reception when she'd asked Khloe, loud enough for 3 tables to hear, "Are you certain about this?" "Mother, he's filing for divorce." There was a pause. Then, "Well?" "Finally. I was beginning to think he was stupider than he looked." "Mother." "Oh, don't mother me, Khloe. You've been miserable for 5 years. We all have. Your father still won't introduce Vincent at the club. It's embarrassing. But what if he wants money? What if he tries to take something?" Catherine laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Darling, what could he possibly take? He doesn't own anything. You have a prenup. We don't have a prenup." Silence. Then, very quietly, "What? I didn't think. What does he have? He's a mechanic. He makes like $40,000 a year. The lawyer said it wasn't necessary." "Khloe Elizabeth Tapia." Catherine's voice could have frozen vodka. "You married a man without a prenuptial agreement? After everything your father and I taught you about protecting family assets? It seemed mean at the time, like I was saying I didn't trust him. You shouldn't have trusted him. My God, Khloe. This is exactly why we were against this marriage. You make one impulsive decision after 3 Cosmos, and now some garage worker is going to take you for everything you have." Khloe felt panic rising in her chest. "What do I do?" "You call David Steinberg. He's the best divorce attorney in Connecticut. You pay whatever he asks, and you make sure that man doesn't get 1 penny of Tapia money. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Mother." "And Khloe, don't speak to him. Don't text him. Don't communicate at all. Everything goes through attorneys now. That's how we protect ourselves from people like him." People like him. Khloe had heard that phrase her entire life. People like him were everywhere in her mother's worldview. People who wanted something, who couldn't be trusted, who would take advantage if given the chance. And usually, when Catherine said people like him, she meant one very specific thing. What Khloe Tapia didn't know, what Khloe didn't know, was that Vincent's attorney, Robert Huntington, was sitting in Vincent's actual office at that very moment. Not the garage. The corner office on the 47th floor of the Hayes Automotive headquarters in Manhattan. "Are you sure about this?" Robert asked, looking out at the view of Central Park. "You could just tell her. Send proof. End this cleanly." Vincent shook his head. He was dressed differently now. Tom Ford suit, Hermes tie, Brunello Cucinelli shoes. This was who he actually was. "No. She needs to learn this lesson the way I learned mine. Publicly, painfully. At the gala, surrounded by everyone she's tried to impress for 5 years." It's cruel, Vincent. So is making someone eat dinner in the kitchen while you entertain guests. So is telling your mother your husband is just the help. So is 5 years of being made invisible. Vincent turned from the window. She'll survive. People like Khloe always survive. But maybe, she'll think twice before treating another human being like they're beneath her. Robert nodded slowly. The documents are ready. Everything transfers at midnight the day of the gala. I've coordinated with the Huntington Foundation. They know what's coming. And Khloe's father, Richard Tapia, has no idea his daughter's husband owns the company he works for. It's going to be quite a shock. Vincent smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Good. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks during which Khloe heard nothing from Vincent. No calls, no texts, no forwarding address. It was like he'd vanished. She'd hired David Steinberg, who'd charged a $50,000 retainer, and assured her that men like Mr. Hayes rarely have the resources to sustain a lengthy legal battle. She'd started looking at apartments in the city, smaller than she'd like, but she supposed she'd have to downsize after the divorce. She'd already mentally budgeted for the cost of keeping the Greenwich house, paying off Vincent with some nominal settlement, and moving forward with her life. What she hadn't budgeted for was the strange phone call she received 2 weeks before the gala. "Is this Khloe Williams?" "Tapia Hayes. Who's calling?" "My name is Jessica Chen. I'm a reporter with the Stamford Advocate. I'm doing a story on Vincent, and I understand you're his wife." Khloe's blood went cold. We're separated." "I see. Well, I wanted to give you a chance to comment on the upcoming transfer of the Huntington Foundation chairmanship. Your husband is taking over as board chair next month, and we're running a feature on—" "I'm sorry, what?" "The Huntington Foundation? Your husband is becoming board chair? I assumed you knew, given that your father is the current vice president of development." Khloe felt like the room was tilting. "I think you have the wrong Vincent." 16-minute mark. Vincent J. Hayes? African-American gentleman about 45 years old, married to you 5 years ago. CEO of Hayes Automotive Group. There must be some mistake. My husband is a mechanic. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, very carefully, "Mrs. Tapia Hayes, are you aware of who your husband is?" "Of course I'm aware. We're married." "Then you know about Hayes Automotive, the $3.2 billion company. The fact that your husband has been on the Forbes 400 list for the past 6 years." Khloe hung up. Then she immediately called her mother, who didn't answer. Then her father, who picked up on the 5th ring. "Daddy, who is Vincent?" "What?" "Khloe, I'm in a meeting." "Daddy, please, who is Vincent J. Hayes?" A very long pause. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because a reporter just called me asking about him taking over the Huntington Foundation. And I don't understand what's happening. And, Khloe." Her father's voice was strange, strained. "Where are you right now?" "I'm home." "Daddy, what's going on?" "Stay there. I'm coming over. Don't talk to anyone. Don't answer the phone. Don't Google anything. Just wait for me." He hung up. Khloe sat in her pristine living room, all white and cream and expensive emptiness, and felt the first cold fingers of real fear creeping up her spine. She pulled out her laptop, opened Google, typed Vincent J. Hayes Automotive. The search results loaded, and Khloe's world ended. Vincent J. Hayes, billionaire CEO. Named to Forbes 400. Hayes Automotive Group reports record profits under Vincent leadership. Philanthropist Vincent donates $50 million to inner-city youth programs. Vincent, from Detroit's Cass Corridor to building a billion-dollar empire. Picture after picture loaded. Vincent in expensive suits. Vincent shaking hands with presidents. Vincent at charity galas. Not as a guest, but as an honoree. Vincent on the cover of Fortune magazine. And in one particular photo, dated 7 years ago, 2 years before their wedding, Vincent is standing next to her father at a Huntington Foundation event. Both men are smiling. The caption read, "Richard Tapia, Vice President of Development, with new foundation board member Vincent." Her father knew. Her father had known the entire time. Richard Tapia arrived 30 minutes later. He looked older than Khloe remembered. Grayer, more tired. He walked into the living room and sat down heavily on the white leather sofa that Khloe had spent 3 months selecting. "You knew," Khloe said. "Not a question, an accusation." "Yes." "The entire time?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" Richard looked at his daughter with something that might have been pity. "Because Vincent asked me not to." Khloe felt like she was drowning. "What?" "5 years ago, Vincent came to me. Before your wedding. He told me he was going to marry you. That you'd met at a party. That you seemed smitten. That you didn't know who he was. He asked me not to tell you." "But why?" "He wanted to know if you loved him for him. Not for his money. Not for his status. Just him." Richard paused. "He said he'd spent his entire adult life wondering if people liked Vincent or liked Vincent's bank account. He wanted one relationship in his life that was real." Khloe felt sick. "So you just let me marry him, knowing that—" "Khloe, I warned you not to marry him. You said he was beneath me." "No, your mother said that. I said you barely knew him. I said you should wait. I said a lot of things you didn't listen to, because you were determined to prove you weren't like us." Richard's voice was gentle, but firm. "You wanted to marry someone your mother would hate. Someone who would make you seem progressive and open-minded. Vincent was convenient for that." "That's not—" "I loved him." "Did you?" Richard asked quietly. "Because I've watched you for 5 years, Khloe. I've watched you treat that man like he was an embarrassment. Like he was something to be hidden. Do you know what it's like to watch your daughter become exactly what your wife is?" "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means your mother is a racist, Khloe. She always has been. And I've spent 35 years making excuses for it, because I loved her. But you didn't have to be like her. You chose to be." The words hung in the air like smoke. "The gala," Khloe said suddenly. "He's going to be at the gala." "Yes." "And he's taking over the foundation." "Yes. Which means he'll be my boss. Your mother's going to love that." "Daddy, what do I do?" Richard stood up. "You could start by calling your husband and apologizing. You could tell him you were wrong. You could ask for forgiveness." He walked toward the door, then stopped. "But honestly, Khloe, after 5 years of what you've put that man through, I don't think sorry is going to be enough." He left, and Khloe sat alone in her expensive, empty house, realizing that she'd just lost the only thing that had ever been real in her perfectly curated life. What she didn't know was that Vincent had one more surprise planned for the gala. One that would change not just her life, but the lives of everyone in her family's social circle. Because Vincent wasn't just taking over the foundation. He was about to expose the corruption that had been hiding in its financial records for the past 15 years. Corruption that led directly back to the Tapia family. And Khloe was going to have a front row seat. The Huntington Foundation Gala was held at the Metropolitan Club in Manhattan, because of course it was. The Metropolitan Club was the kind of place where membership required not just money, but the right kind of money. Old money, white money. The kind of money that came with bloodlines you could trace back to the Mayflower, or failing that, at least to the robber barons. Vincent had been denied membership twice, which made it all the more satisfying that tonight he owned the building. He arrived at 8 o'clock in a midnight blue Brioni tuxedo that cost more than most people's cars. His date was Simone Johnson, his executive assistant and longtime friend, who wore a stunning emerald Versace gown and had her natural hair styled in an elaborate updo that had taken 4 hours at the best salon in Manhattan. They walked up the red carpet together, past photographers who'd been expecting celebrities, and instead got Vincent, whose face they didn't recognize, but whose presence commanded attention anyway. Inside, the ballroom was everything Khloe's world looked like. White walls, crystal chandeliers, tables decorated with centerpieces that cost more than a month's rent. And people, so many people in tuxedos and gowns, dripping with jewelry and privilege, talking too loudly about their vacation homes and their children's Ivy League schools. Khloe was already there. Vincent saw her immediately, even though she was on the far side of the room. She wore a red Valentino gown that she'd probably bought specifically for this night. She was standing next to her mother, Catherine, who was holding court with a group of women whose combined net worth was probably in the hundreds of millions. She hadn't seen him yet. "Are you sure about this?" Simone asked quietly. "No," Vincent said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." They walked deeper into the ballroom. People were starting to notice. Heads turned. Conversations paused. There was something about Vincent, about the way he carried himself, about the cut of his tuxedo, about the confidence in his stride, that made people realize this wasn't just another guest. This was someone important. "Is that Vincent?" someone whispered. "The Vincent? From Hayes Automotive? What's he doing here?" Khloe heard the whispers. She turned, and across the crowded ballroom, her eyes met her husband's. The color drained from her face. Vincent smiled and started walking toward her. "Khloe," he said when he reached her. His voice was pleasant, polite, the voice of a stranger making small talk at a party. "You look beautiful." Khloe couldn't speak. She just stared at him like he was a ghost. Khloe Tapia, however, had no such problem. "I don't know who you think you are," she said, her voice sharp with indignation. "But this is a private event. If you weren't invited, I suggest you—" "Mother," Khloe finally managed. Her voice was barely a whisper. "This is Vincent." Catherine's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "What?" "My husband, Vincent." The women around them had gone silent, all pretense of conversation abandoned. This was too good, too shocking, too delicious not to pay attention to. "That's impossible," Catherine said. "Your husband is a mechanic." "No," Vincent said pleasantly. "I work at a garage. There's a difference. I own the garage, and about 400 others like it, along with 32 manufacturing plants, a research and development division, and a racing team that won Le Mans last year." He let that sink in, then continued. "But more relevantly to tonight, I'm the new chairman of the Huntington Foundation, which means, Mrs. Tapia, that I'm now in charge of the organization where your husband has worked for the past 20 years. The dinner portion of the evening was torture for Khloe. She was seated at table 1, the head table, reserved for family and VIPs, directly across from Vincent, who made pleasant conversation with the other guests, as if nothing unusual was happening. Khloe couldn't eat, couldn't drink, could barely breathe. Her father sat next to her, looking like a man who'd just realized he was standing on a trapdoor. Her mother, on her other side, was rigid with fury and shock, her perfectly applied makeup cracking slightly around the edges. Around them, the ballroom buzzed with whispers. Everyone knew now. The story was spreading like wildfire. Khloe Tapia had married a secret billionaire and spent 5 years treating him like hired help. It was the scandal of the season, possibly the scandal of the decade. At 9:30, the foundation's outgoing chairman, an elderly white man named Preston Huntington III, stood up to give his final address. He spoke about the foundation's mission, its history, its importance to the community. Then he said the words everyone had been waiting for. "And now, it's my great honor to introduce my successor, a man who has already proven himself to be one of the great philanthropists and business leaders of our generation. Please welcome the new chairman of the Huntington Foundation, Vincent J. Hayes." And the applause was polite, but uncertain. These people didn't know how to react to Vincent. He was successful, that much was clear. But he was also black, which in their world meant he would always be a certain kind of outsider. Not fully one of them, no matter how much money he had. Vincent walked to the podium like he owned the room, because technically he did. "Thank you, Preston," he said. His voice carried across the ballroom with the easy authority of someone who'd given hundreds of speeches. "It's an honor to take on this role. The Huntington Foundation has done incredible work for decades, and I'm excited to build on that legacy." He paused, looking out at the sea of white faces in expensive clothes. "But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't also taking this position to make some changes. You see, I've spent the past 6 months reviewing the Foundation's financial records. With the help of forensic accountants, attorneys, and the FBI. Yes, the FBI. I've uncovered some disturbing patterns." The room went silent. Over the past 15 years, approximately $43 million in foundation funds have been misappropriated. Money that was supposed to go to inner-city schools, youth programs, and community development has instead been funneled through shell companies and offshore accounts. Khloe felt her heart stop. These funds have benefited a small group of individuals connected to the Foundation's board. People who saw this organization not as a charity, but as a personal bank account. Vincent pulled out a sheet of paper. "Richard Tapia, Catherine Tapia, Preston Huntington Jr., Sarah Vanderbilt Chen, Robert Carrington III. All of them are implicated in this scheme. All of them are being investigated by federal authorities. And all of them, as of tonight, are being removed from any association with this foundation." Khloe turned to her father. Richard's face had gone gray. Her mother looked like she was going to be sick. This can't be happening," Catherine whispered. But it was happening. Security personnel were already moving toward their table. Federal agents, identifiable by their badges and earpieces, had positioned themselves at the exits. "Wait," Richard said, standing up. His voice shook. "Vincent, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain, Richard. You stole from children. You took money meant for kids who needed books and lunches and hope. And you used it to finance your vacation home in the Hamptons." Vincent's voice was harder now. "There's no explanation that makes that okay." Khloe stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Vincent, please. My father, he didn't. He did, Vincent said, looking at his wife for the first time since the speech began. And so did your mother. They've been running this scheme since before we met, Khloe. They're thieves. Just thieves with better table manners than the people they look down on. The room erupted. Voices raised. People standing up. Phones are being pulled out to record the chaos. Khloe ran, out of the ballroom, down the marble hallway, into the ladies' room, where she locked herself in a stall and tried not to vomit. She was still in the bathroom when someone knocked on the stall door. Khloe. It's me. Vincent, go away. We need to talk. I said, go away. Her voice broke on the last word. I'm not leaving until you come out. Khloe sat on the toilet lid, fully dressed in her red Valentino gown, and felt tears streaming down her face. Why did you do this? Which part? Marrying you? Hiding my identity? Exposing your parents? All of it. There was a long pause. Then, I married you because I thought you were different. You seemed kind, open. You talked about social justice and equality, and I believed you meant it. I thought maybe, finally, I'd found someone who would love me for me. I did love you. No, you loved the idea of me. The radical act of marrying a black mechanic. But when you had to actually live with me, when did you have to introduce me to your friends? When you had to reconcile your progressive self-image with the reality of being married to someone your mother considers beneath her. You couldn't do it. Khloe opened the stall door. She looked terrible. Mascara running, eyes red, hair falling out of its careful updo. I'm sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't undo 5 years, Khloe. Sorry doesn't make up for being told to eat in the kitchen while you're entertaining guests. Sorry doesn't fix the fact that you were ashamed of me. I wasn't. You were. And the worst part is, you didn't even realize it. You thought you were being kind by letting me stay in the house. By letting me drive my old car and work at a garage and exist in your life as long as I knew my place. Khloe felt fresh tears. What do you want from me? Nothing. I don't want anything from you anymore. Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out papers. Divorce papers, already signed by me. Sign them, and we're done. And my parents? That's not your concern anymore. Vincent, please. They're my parents. Even if they did what you said, they did. And they'll face the consequences. Maybe prison. Probably just fines and house arrest and a slap on the wrist, because people like your parents rarely face real consequences. But they're done in society, Khloe. Done at the club. Done at events like this. They're pariahs now. Because of you? No. Because of what they did. I just made sure people found out. Vincent turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I did love you. 5 years ago, I really did. But you can't love someone who doesn't respect you. And you never respected me, Khloe. Not once. He left. And Khloe stood alone in the marble bathroom of the Metropolitan Club, wearing a dress that cost more than most people make in a month, realizing that she'd lost everything that actually mattered, while desperately protecting things that never did. Outside, police were arresting her father. Her mother was screaming about lawyers and connections and how this will never stick. The gala had descended into chaos. What was supposed to be the social event of the season had become a crime scene. And Khloe Tapia Hayes, soon to be just Khloe Tapia again, had to walk back out into that ballroom and face the consequences of 5 years of cruelty disguised as tolerance. But there was still one more surprise coming. One Khloe wouldn't discover until the next morning, when she woke up in her childhood bedroom at her parents' house and turned on the news. Because Vincent's revenge wasn't finished yet. Khloe woke up to her phone buzzing, 53 missed calls, 214 text messages. Her social media accounts were on fire with notifications. She picked up the phone with shaking hands and opened her news app. The headline made her stomach drop. Billionaire Vincent announces $500 million fund for racial justice. She clicked on the article. Vincent J. Hayes, CEO of Hayes Automotive Group and newly appointed chairman of the Huntington Foundation, announced this morning the creation of the Equity and Justice Fund, a $500 million initiative to combat systemic racism in education, housing, and criminal justice. For too long, Williams said in a press conference, I've watched people who claim to care about equality treat others with contempt based solely on the color of their skin. I've experienced it personally. My wife, soon to be ex-wife, spent 5 years treating me like I was inferior because I'm black. She's not unique. She's just a product of a system that teaches people that wealth and whiteness equal worth. The fund will provide scholarships to students of color, legal defense for victims of racial discrimination, and support for businesses owned by minorities. Williams has pledged to match donations dollar for dollar, up to an additional $500 million. Khloe scrolled through the article, seeing photo after photo of Vincent. Vincent at the press conference. Vincent shaking hands with civil rights leaders. Vincent is being interviewed on morning news shows. And in every interview, he mentioned her. Not by name, he was too smart for that. But he talked about individuals who claim to be progressive while harboring deep-seated prejudices. He talked about white savior complexes that mask genuine racism. He talked about the particular cruelty of being married to someone ashamed of you. Her mother burst into the room without knocking. Khloe Tapia looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Her hair was disheveled, her face bare of makeup, her hands shaking as she held up her own phone. Do you see this? Do you see what he's doing to us? Mother, he's destroying us, Khloe. Your father's been suspended from his job. The club revoked our membership. The Vanderbilts won't return my calls. We're being investigated by the FBI. Catherine's voice climbed higher with each sentence. All because you married some... Don't. Khloe's voice was sharp. Don't you dare. Don't I dare what? Say what everyone's thinking. You married beneath you, and now we're all paying for it. I married a good man, Khloe said, surprising herself. A good man who I treated like garbage because I was more concerned with what people like you thought than with being a decent human being. Oh, please. He's making us out to be racists. We are racists, Mother. Khloe stood up. You are. I was. We spent 5 years treating Vincent like he was less than human because he's black, and we called it having standards. Catherine stared at her daughter as if she were a stranger. I don't know who you are anymore. Good, because I'm not proud of who I was. Catherine left, slamming the door behind her. Khloe sat on the edge of her childhood bed, pink walls and white furniture, everything exactly as it had been when she was 16, and realized that at 35 years old, she'd never actually grown up. She'd just gotten better at hiding her prejudices behind expensive clothes and progressive vocabulary. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello? Mrs. Hayes, this is Jessica Chen from the Stamford Advocate. I was hoping to get your comment on the Vincent situation. Specifically, your side of the story. Khloe thought about it, about telling her version, about defending herself, about explaining that she wasn't really that bad, that there were extenuating circumstances, that Vincent was being unfair. Then she thought about Vincent eating dinner in the kitchen while she entertained guests in the dining room. No comment, she said, and hung up. 6 weeks later, Khloe sat in a conference room at Huntington & Associates, signing the divorce papers. The settlement was more than fair, more than she deserved. Vincent was giving her the Greenwich house, a $2 million cash payment, and the BMW. He was asking for nothing, except that she sign the papers and leave him alone. Robert Huntington, Vincent's attorney, slid the final page across the table. Sign here, and here, initial here. Khloe picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the signature line. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. Of course. Did he ever really love me? Or was this whole thing just revenge? Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then, he loved you very much, Mrs. Hayes. That's why this hurt him so badly. But he lied to me. About who he was. He didn't lie. He just didn't tell you something you never bothered to ask. In 5 years, did you ever once ask Vincent about his dreams, his goals, his past? Did you ever ask what he did before you met? Khloe felt heat in her cheeks. I assumed. You assumed he was exactly what he appeared to be at first glance. A mechanic, someone simple, someone you could mold into whatever you needed him to be. Robert's voice wasn't unkind, but it was firm. That's not love, Mrs. Hayes. That's ownership. Khloe signed the papers. One signature, then another, then initials on 6 different pages. When she was done, Robert gathered them up and placed them in a folder. You're officially divorced, Mrs. Tapia. Congratulations. It's Mrs. Hayes. Actually, as of these papers, you've reverted to your maiden name. That was Mr. Hayes's one requirement. Of course it was. Khloe couldn't even keep his name. The final severing of their connection. What happened to my parents? They're awaiting trial, probably looking at plea deals. The foundation has agreed not to pursue civil charges in exchange for full restitution. Your father will likely never work in philanthropy again, but he'll avoid prison. And Vincent, what's he doing now? Robert smiled slightly. He's in Detroit, opening a new community center in the neighborhood where he grew up. He's planning to open 50 more across the country, all funded by the Equity and Justice Fund. Is he seeing anyone? That's not information I can share. But I can tell you that Mr. Hayes has made it clear he has no interest in reconciliation. He's moved on, Mrs. Tapia. I'd suggest you do the same. Khloe left the law office and walked out into a beautiful spring day. The sun was shining. Birds were singing. Everything looked the same as it always had, but everything was different. She had money. She had a house. She had her freedom. What she didn't have was the one thing she'd taken for granted for 5 years. A good man who loved her despite her flaws. And she'd lost him because she couldn't see past the color of his skin and the assumptions that came with it. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Khloe stood in line at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. She'd moved to the city after selling the Greenwich house. She couldn't stand to be there anymore, surrounded by memories of her failure. She was working now. Actually working. At a non-profit that helped women escape abusive relationships. It didn't pay much. The work was hard. but it felt real in a way nothing in her old life had. She was waiting for her coffee, just a regular coffee, none of the complicated orders she used to make, when she heard a familiar voice. "Khloe." She turned, and there he was. Vincent. He was dressed casually, jeans, a t-shirt, sneakers. He looked good, happy. There was a woman with him, a beautiful black woman in a sundress, holding his hand. "Vincent." Khloe's heart was pounding. "Hi." "Hi." He smiled, but it was polite, distant. The smile you give an acquaintance, not someone you used to love. "How are you?" I'm good. I'm working at a nonprofit, helping abuse survivors." "That's good. That's really good." An awkward pause. The woman with Vincent squeezed his hand gently. He glanced at her, and his smile became genuine. Warm. "This is Simone," he said. "Simone, this is Khloe, my ex-wife." Simone extended her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "It's nice to meet you." "You too." Another pause. Khloe wanted to say so many things, that she was sorry, that she'd changed, that she understood now what she'd lost. But Vincent's name was called for his coffee order. He picked up 2 cups, handed one to Simone, and turned back to Khloe. "Take care of yourself, Khloe," he said. "You too." And then he left, walking out of the coffee shop with Simone, laughing at something she said, looking happier than Khloe had ever seen him. Khloe got her coffee and sat down at a small table by the window. She watched Vincent and Simone walk down the street, their hands still intertwined, and felt something inside her finally break and release. He'd moved on. He was happy. He'd found someone who saw him, really saw him, and loved what she saw. And Khloe? She was learning, slowly, painfully, but learning. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app, started typing. Things I'm learning. 1. Money doesn't make you better than anyone. 2. Skin color doesn't determine worth. 3. Pride is expensive. 4. Humility is priceless. 5. You can't undo the past, but you can change who you become. She saved the note, took a sip of her coffee, and started planning her next day at the nonprofit, where she'd help another woman escape a situation that, while different from her own, was rooted in the same ugly truth. Sometimes the worst prisons are the ones we build ourselves, with our prejudices and our pride. And sometimes the only way out is to admit you were the architect of your own destruction. And that's where Khloe's story ends. Or maybe it's where it begins. Because change, real change, doesn't happen in a moment. It happens slowly, over time, through hard work and genuine self-reflection. Vincent got his justice. Khloe learned her lesson. And somewhere, maybe, both of them are becoming better versions of themselves. But I want to know something from you. What story do you want to hear next? Do you want another story about justice and karma? A story about someone who overcame impossible odds? A love story that transcended barriers? Or a story about family secrets that changed everything? Comment below and let me know. The story with the most votes gets made next. But before you go, I need you to do 3 things. 1. Hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of people who believe stories like this matter. Stories about justice, equality, and the consequences of judging people by their appearance instead of their character. Hit that like button if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that we all have biases we need to examine. 3. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who might be treating people in their life with less respect than they deserve. Someone who needs to remember that everyone deserves dignity. Because stories like Vincent and Khloe's aren't just entertainment. They're mirrors. They show us who we are and who we could be. And if this story made you uncomfortable, good. That means it's working. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, subscribe for more stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us all to be better. Until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep treating every person you meet with the respect they deserve. Because you never know who you're really talking to.